Maybe we can recognize that by being present in front of the screen at this moment, we are generating something together, something that's new. Something that's based in goodness and wide, open, noble aspirations for ourselves, for each other, and for the world. And maybe we can just breathe in this fresh, new space that we're generating in this moment. And maybe just for a second we can taste that incredible sweetness of being alive. That sweetness that we so often lose track of, but that's always right there, waiting to be tasted. And we can see if we can try to feel our whole self, our full being participating in that sweetness. And maybe just for a moment, when we breathe with the whole world. And as we continue breathing, we can turn our awareness to the sounds. Any sound that offers itself to our hearing. And we see if we can just hear the sound without putting words to it, without telling ourselves stories about where it comes from or what it is. See if we can just let our awareness be fully present for the sounds that the world is sending our way. And in a moment when the sound of the gong fills our auditory awareness, we can just let it fill our awareness. Hold the sound, even though there's nothing to hold. Offer our presence to the sound. And then at the moment when the sound comes to an end, we just rest in that awareness of no sound until another sound offers itself to us. And now maybe we just sit for a few moments and allow whatever sound appears in our awareness, to rest there in our awareness until it's finished. Okay, and we turn our awareness a bit wider and can open our eyes if they're closed, or raise our gaze if it's lowered, and return here to this shared space. So one of the things that we notice quite often and quite quickly when we start sitting and trying to take some sensory perception like sound as our object, we recognize that it's very difficult for us not to interpret or look for meaning or tell ourselves stories about what's going on around us. Did that happen? Listening to the sound, you start saying, oh, is that an airplane? Oh no, I think that's a truck. Oh, who is that coming? Oh no, or the dog's going to enter and start barking. We immediately intervene in the sense perceptions that are presented to our awareness. And this is very natural because we have sense perceptions so that we can be aware of our environment, to keep ourselves, protected, and to be able to pursue the things that are good for us. That's a basic function of being able to perceive and interpret the world. But because we are so habituated and so oriented towards finding meaning and making meaning, we don't spend any time in the stage of just knowing or being aware or being present. And so in Buddhist philosophy, it is not accepted that we have direct sense perception. And that might seem kind of counterintuitive. It sounds like that's what sense perception is. It's direct. In Buddhist terms, in some Buddhist philosophical schools, not in all schools because Buddhism is extremely diverse, but in one of the main schools that's followed within Tibetan Buddhism, the idea is that even when we are seeing or hearing, there is always some sort of conceptual or cognitive intervention that we're doing. And my favorite example of this is to just ask, what's this? And just looking at what you see right now, there's no reason, if there's only sense perception, that you would be able to understand that I'm talking about this. If I just say, what is this? What are your clues as to what the this is that I'm talking to? You're interpreting visually, right? So just to be able to get to the point where you turn your awareness to this, you've already started interpreting. But when I ask you, what is this? Any answers? What is this?
Piece of paper.
Okay, a piece of paper. Anyone seeing a piece of paper? Anyone's eyes seeing a piece of paper? No one's eyes can see a piece of paper. Our retina can only see color, dark and light, shapes. Our eyes cannot see pieces of paper. Pieces of paper is already many, many miles down the runway of interpretation. And so when we think about what that means is that even if there is some moment in which we are solely, our brain is only capturing the visual experience, our mind mind doesn't experience that. Our mind experiences pieces of paper. And when, right now, if we think about a piece of paper, we will have this mental image. And we never stop interacting through mental images. Right? So these are just ways of saying that what our experience is profoundly filtered through our ideas about what our experiences are. And this could be an interesting philosophical moment, commentary, or something abstract, theoretical that we could play with if we were so oriented. But when it comes down to our lives, when it comes down to who we are, we have this challenge that we are not oriented towards experiencing ourselves as we are. We are oriented towards seeing a mental image or a public image or a social image and having that be who we tell ourselves that we are. And one of the things that we're trying to do in meditation, and this is a pretty high order task to ask of anything, but meditation is made for it. We are trying to be able to experience ourselves as we are, without referring to what other people think we are, what we've convinced other people that we are, what we tell ourselves we are, what we've convinced ourselves we are, but simply see who it is that we are, because who we are is present in every moment. It's always there. But we are not trained, we're not educated, we're not oriented towards experiencing that. We're oriented towards, an image of ourselves that we have from the mirror, where we really think that we look kind of reversed, right? Because we're so used to seeing ourselves in the mirror. And also, we are social beings. We are tremendously dependent on the way that we get other people to perceive us and respond to us for us to have some sense of who we are. And this is all smoke and mirrors, folks. This is all, a matter of our personal marketing and how good we are at making and sustaining an impression of the person that we want others to be, which is probably the impression of who we want others to think that we are, which probably also is who we would like to be. But when this is how we construct our sense of ourselves, we will always feel like fakes. We will always have an imposter syndrome. Why? Because we know that in order to get other people to respond to us as if we were a certain kind of person, it depends on manipulating appearances. It depends on projecting a certain image or impression to the world. It depends on our skill at manipulating other people's interpretations of us. And that's a skill. That is not a direct reflection of our goodness, of our bravery, of our whatever it is that we're trying to project. We know that's marketing. And we're either good at it, and we're all pretty good at it, actually. Not perfect. But we're all pretty adept at, if we want people to think that we are, and gender roles come into it, and class comes into it, and profession comes into it, and who we are in among our siblings comes into it. We want to project, if we're teachers, we want to project competence and knowledge and some sort of authority. And if we are, if we see ourselves as intellectuals or artists or however we see ourselves, we understand that there are certain ways that we project that through our clothing, through our hairstyle, through our environment, through our home, through our way of speaking, through our gestures. Do we talk like this all the time, or are we very kind of more sober? We are constantly doing this. Sometimes we want people to take care of us, and so we project our fragility in a certain way. We are very, very experienced at that. And yet, no matter how well we are able to do that, we always know it's an act. It's a manipulation. We are dealing with appearances. And that residual lack of authenticity, that residual sense of being an imposter, lives with us all the time. Subtly. Especially when we start to ask ourselves, who am I really? What kind of a phenomenon am I? What is my place? What do I want to be my place? What are my aspirations? We suddenly realize that a lot of what we've been constructing does not give us even the slightest clue as to answer that question. And I think many a midlife crisis has to do with the fact that, people build a life based on a certain set of assumptions as to who they should be and what a good life is and what would be appropriate for them and what would make them happy and what would make their, family happy and their partner happy. And we get very good at it, and we focus on achieving certain things, and we get there, and then there's a certain point in which we realize that we never really asked ourselves, in a very deep sense, where should I be going in life? Where should I be? And so our tendency to have really fundamental questions about life and about ourselves answered by other questions leaves us with this big deficit that in many cases meditation opens up a space in which at least we can recognize that that question is still an open question. And one of the things that we see when we're meditating, as we did in the beginning, when we listen to sounds, we are already telling ourselves some story about the sound. We're already interpreting. And so one of the things that we want to do when we're meditating is to be able to experience things without the stories that we habitually tell ourselves, because that all represents all of the learning that we want to kind of throw into question. And when we want to have some sense of who am I, what does my presence feel like? What does it feel like when I am fully present? What does it feel like to be completely awake And in a certain sense, all of the presuppositions that we have, all the unexamined ideas that we have, all of the identities that we internalize so deeply without ever really knowing that we were doing it, all of those things put us to sleep. They deaden us to who we really are because they assume we already know. And so when we're meditating, one of the things that we have an opportunity to do is to fully and truly see ourselves without our eyes. See ourselves, from our awareness, from our experience, not from our perception, not from our ideas. And this is, it's clear that not all types of meditation are taking us there. Some of what we're doing is we're just focusing on a certain task at hand and we're learning to really focus, which is obviously a very important skill. Having the ability to be attentive, to stop being so distracted is a very important ability. But meditation in its broadest sense in this path is a tool to profound self-awareness. And in Buddhist understanding, profound self-awareness is a tool of liberation. Because we liberate ourselves from all of the preconceived notions that we have at this moment as to who we are. And at the same time, so there's this idea of profound self-knowledge, a self-knowledge that is truly liberatory. And then there's also, as we noticed the last time, there is this sense in which just to be really fully effective in our relationships, we also need to learn how to offer a much fuller presence than we normally do. And that's something to kind of be observing. How much of the time that we're with another are we not really fully with that other? How much of that time are we planning the next meal or doing the next lesson plan or remembering something that we forgot to do or running through our agenda for the next day or worrying about someone else who's not there? How much are we falling asleep on others? Even when we're in the middle of a conversation with them. And when we really start watching that, it can be terrifying. It can be terrifying how successful we are at maintaining our end of a conversation with very little mental presence. And I think this is something especially dangerous for us right now, because having social media and having a cell phone and having a screen as our way of connecting, we are trying to be present for someone who's absent. And we're often trying to be present for multiple people at the same time. We have one chat open here, we have the emails open there, we have someone calling to us from another room, and our attention is just very naturally divided. And we have a tremendous habit of making ourselves absent where we are. When we grab our cell phone and start interacting, we become absent to our environment, which is why one of the reasons it's so dangerous to talk on the phone when people are driving. Even when they don't take their eye off the phone, you can just not be paying very much attention, because we absent ourselves from where we are in order to be present to whoever it is that we're communicating with. And that's, that's a big thing. And so one of the things that we're trying to do, meditation, is just to counteract some of the negative effects of the information age or the technology era that we're living in, that has tremendous advantages. Our being here at this moment together, exploring these ideas is just one of many, and they're not to be denied, but they do have unintended consequences because of the habits that we have of not being fully present. So it can exacerbate tremendously something that we're already very much habituated to. And so when we have a meditation practice where we are trying to learn again how to be fully present, like a child holding its first flower. The very first, if you can imagine a child in this time of lockdown, in the time of COVID, who doesn't have plants at home, who suddenly goes out and sees a flower for the first time, and wow. So if we can capture some experience where we suddenly did have some moments of a real full presence that we were offering to what we were doing, it's really useful to connect with that sensation, with that experience, and then see if we can try to offer it to whatever it is that we're taking as our object of meditation. But finally, one of the things in this kind of trajectory of meditation that we're exploring right now, meditation moves away from objects of meditation. And so in Mahamudra meditation, we train our ability to meditate on objects because our mind is used to holding an object. That's how it functions. But ultimately, we have this huge task of coming to know the subject. Who am I? Who is the I who has all these thoughts? And how do we get a glimpse of the thinker without thoughts? It's unthinkable, literally, right? In meditation, we first train in being able to keep our awareness steady. And that's important because we are very much, change a channel, what's next? Okay, change a channel. We're constantly scanning our mental environment for something new to think. And, people who are slightly more academically or intellectually oriented, we have a big thing in this area because our main form of entertainment tends to be mental. And so I remember that some of the first times I was doing meditation retreat, I'm guilty of that, guilty as charged of that one. I thought, wow, this is so great. I sat there and I was just entertaining myself with my thoughts and things to think, and I didn't have to do anything, but I could just sit there and think about this and think about that and think about this. I just couldn't move my head like that. Otherwise, I could just think about this, think about that, and think about this, and really kind of work through that, and it was great. Unfortunately, I wasn't actually meditating. I was either ruminating or just, thinking. But ultimately, with this kind of meditation, we want to start to have glimpses of the subject, who is thinking. What is that? What is the nature of this luminous mind? Rather than all the objects that it illuminates with its process of cognition or contemplation. And so the meditation, which maybe we'll just do a couple more times at the end, where we listen to a sound and then we see if we can rest without an object. And so what we're doing when we're meditating on the sound of a bell or a gong, we are making our awareness sharp, crisp, awake, present. But then we let the object drop off, which it does very naturally for us, very nicely. And we see if we can just stay in touch with the part of ourself that's observing, the awareness itself. And it's, these are long trainings. This technique is one that normally would come a fair bit later in the training, but it's something, to awaken our enthusiasm for meditation. And it is something that if, since many of you do have, a solid meditation practice, some of you may be at the point where this is something that could actually be quite effective. And so what we're trying to do with this is, if you think of our awareness is constantly, holding on to some object, thinking about that object, telling stories about that object, getting to the point like, okay, that's situated, now what's next? Okay, next one. We're constantly doing that, and our focus is always on the object. It's not on the subject. The trouble that we have when we're trying to do this kind of meditation is what happens when your awareness tries to just look at awareness. You turn the subject into another object. And then you're not seeing the subject that's looking at the object awareness. And so rather than make awareness another object, we try to be able to rest in this generate a kind of stability of awareness where the objects can just come and go in front of us. And that would be a training prior to Mahamudra training, which is where this is going. Where you gain an ability to have thoughts arise, sensory perceptions arise, and they just arise and then they pass away and you just let them go. Where you as the person aware or as the subject can kind of hold yourself steady, and you don't need to start running after the different thoughts or enacting a little play with one of the sounds that you hear. You can just stay there and you can let them sort of stream in front of your awareness. And while that is happening, we start to open up the space, and it's hard to explain, exactly what the right conditions are, except that you meditate and suddenly you're just there and then it falls off again. But you're holding yourself aware and letting the procession of perceptions or thoughts just kind of stream in front of you, a little bit like being in a train and just watching everything go by. And yes, you're observing, but you're not trying to, save the young kids that you see from the train. You're just kind of letting it all stream past. And we know from the beginning that we want to get some sense of who the subject is. What is this? We want to root ourselves in the awareness and start to feel what that awareness is like. And in this kind of meditation, then we start to have moments when we feel our own presence. We feel ourselves to be present. If we then say, "Oh, I'm feeling myself to be present. What's this like?" we lose it because we make it an object. Right? So it's this very interesting trick where we do put an object there, but we hold the object more and more lightly. And there is this idea that we're just gently touching the object. We're not holding it in our awareness. We want it to be able to keep on its way. And so we'll do this a couple of times with sound, and see if you can just hold the sound very lightly in your awareness. You're not like, okay, when's the next moment? Okay, when is it gonna, okay, it's getting less. You want to just kind of let the sound flow past. Time is carrying that sound forward through its progression very naturally. You let that happen, but you really are attentive to what's going on. And then with that light touch in the moment when you can just feel like you're just kind of lifting your fingers from an object that you don't want to move when you take your fingers off, you just hold yourself in front of that, the disappearing of the sound. And then when it disappears, just rest there. without telling yourself, oh, now it's disappeared, this is the key moment, I need to be sure I don't get this, oh, where am I, oh, that won't work. So you're really just kind of letting it all happen, and you're just really just being present. You're not doing and you're not thinking. So let's just try it a few times and see how it goes. So we can put ourselves in our meditation posture, or if that's not how we've trained, then we can just be however we are in a relaxed way, and we just let our mind become present, and we can open our awareness specifically to any sounds. Okay. And then we can just open our awareness back out. Know that we're sitting in front of a screen. Know that we're connected. And open our eyes if they're closed. Raise our gaze if it was lowered. And I think we leave it at that for this time.